I'm just getting back from the wooden boat show that was out in Mystic, Connecticut last week. And it was supposed to be a 3-day show from Friday through Sunday, but unfortunately Sunday got canceled because of the impending Hurricane Henry, which turned out that it just fizzled out and it was just a lot of rain. However, we had a great 2 days of beautiful weather, and I met lots and lots of all of you that had stopped by to see me. So anyway, take a look at some of these highlights. The 29th Wooden Boat Show was held at the Mystic Seaport in late August. It returned after a 1-year hiatus from the corona pandemic. This rebooting of this year's show was a grand success. For those who have not had the opportunity to visit the show, it is not only filled with lots of wooden boats, but also vendors of new and old products. I'm always impressed by the I built it myself section. It's always great to visit with self-builders like myself, comparing notes and tips. However, there are also professional builders. I was particularly interested in the Artisan Boat Works, who I had interviewed in 2019 about the Gill Smith catboat Whirlwind. It was nice to see its progress. They also bought a reproduction of a Herreshoff 12.5, the boat that inspired Joel White to design the Haven 12.5, the boat that I'm building. As many of you know, the difference between a Herreshoff and a Haven is that the Herreshoff is a full keel boat, hence the absence of the centerboard trunk. It was nice to check out all of the details of the build and got a few ideas for my own build. I want to thank Andrew Breeze with Wooden Boat Publications for creating YouTube Alley. I and several other YouTube channels were invited to participate. Andrew Guest from Restoring Roslyn was there. Lou Sardiz from Tips from a Shipwright was also there, and of course myself from The Art of Boat Building. Andrew is restoring a 118-year-old Cornish lugger right there in Mystic. It was great fun seeing Roslyn and hanging out at the boatyard Friday evening with he and Anne. On Saturday, Lou and I had a great time talking about our projects. It was also a pleasure to meet his videographer, Halsey Fulton. Lou is currently working on building Orca, the boat from Jaws. I've been invited out to Rhode Island to lend him a hand. That should be great fun. Well, if you ever get the opportunity to go out to the Wooden Boat Show, it is well worth it. It's really a fantastic event. In fact, I'm looking forward to heading back next year. Well, on my trip back, which was a 2.5-day drive from Mystic to here, I was thinking about the way my boat looked outside by the water. And I thought what would be cool would be do a drawing of my Haven in situ. So in order to do that, I thought, well, what I'll do is to find some images of a Haven or a Herreshoff and work from that. So that's one of the great things about having a camera in your pocket at all times. I've got actually lots and lots of pictures of Havens and Herreshoffs. So I've selected one and printed it off right here. So there are actually 2 challenges to drawing a 3-dimensional object. And the first is transferring or translating that 3-dimensional object onto a flat surface. And the second is transferring the idea of it being in color into black and white. So one of the nice things about having a camera is, especially a camera like this that we all carry in our pockets now, that's a very easy thing to do. So in the past, before the invention of the camera, it was no easy feat in order to transfer an image onto a flat surface. Renaissance artist and inventor Leonardo da Vinci first described a mechanism in 1502 in his papers Codus Atlanticus that would make drawing in perfect perspective much easier to achieve, something that would be later known as camera obscura. Camera obscura, which means dark room in Latin, is a box-shaped device used in the aid of drawing. How it works is that the image lets light in through a small opening, also referred to as a pinhole, on one side, and then it projects a reversed and inverted image on the other. In addition to Da Vinci, many old masters used camera obscura. In 2017, author Jane Kelly uncovered long-held suspicions that Dutch artist Vermeer actually traced his compositions in her book, Traces of Vermeer. It's an old tradition for artists getting images on a surface using a camera. The most important parts of this, however, is what you do once you have that image on the paper. And that part is really where the artistic part of it comes in. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to take this photograph, enlarge it, and turn it into a drawing on this piece of paper. So the first thing that I want to do is to take this photograph and grid it off. So what I'm going to do is, looks like the image part is just a little over 10 inches. So at every 1 inch mark, I'm going to go through. Once I've got it done that direction, I'm going to grid it off the opposite way as well. So I've got a 1 inch grid across the whole thing. Now what I need to do is to make a corresponding grid to my other piece of paper. And because the mast is cut off here, I want to include that, so I'm going to make the drawing rectangular this way, as opposed, which would be what we'd call portrait, as opposed to in landscape like it is here. So my grid here are 1 inch squares, and this direction is 10 inches. So if I take a little bigger ruler here and measure my paper, which is 19. So if I make my grid on here 1 1/4 inches, then 10 inches would be, let's see, should be 12.5. And I think that's probably going to be about the right amount. So that's my next step, is to draw out a grid on here with 1 1/4 inch marks. So what I've determined here is, because I want to add the mast there, that I think that if this were too short, but if I take this ruler and put here, and I think if I go up to around 14 inches or so, that should leave enough room for the mast. So 14 times 1 1/4 is 17.5. So what I've done here is I've centered this so that here I have 14.5. So what I have here is I took and centered the 12.5 for the bottom, and then so that actually came up 3 1/4 on each side. So I came up 3 1/4, and if I then come up this way 17.5, which brings me up here. So I've made some little tick marks right here on each corner, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some tape here that's a safe, easy release kind of tape, and I'm going to go across and tape right at the bottom like that. And I'm going to continue to tape all the way around the border at those tick marks. So now that I've got the borders all taped off, what I'm going to do now is go through and on the tape make an 1.25" mark as I go along. And now that I've got little tick marks all the way around there, what I need to do is to put a grid on here. So I'm going to use a fairly hard pencil, and I'm actually using a 3H. The H on pencils like this means hard. The higher the number, the harder the lead is. So what I can tell here is that in my photograph is that if I come over 7 and up 6, I really get pretty much all of the information that I need from the photograph. So I'm only going to grid that part of it onto the paper. I'm drawing these light enough so that they'll be easy to erase, so it may be a little hard to pick up on the camera. But I think you should be able to see this grid of lines in there. So now that I've got my grid on here, what I'm going to do is start with the hull of the boat. So when I go up here on row 1 and number 5, so number 5 is right here. So what I want to do is to draw this line in proportion that it is within that square. So if I go over here to this one, if I come up about like so, it looks to me like it does something about like that. Now I can move down to the next square here in 5, and it looks like it starts on the far end here and up to that point. And now I can figure out where the bilge comes down like this, so that looks like it's not quite halfway over. And then the next one, this part here, looks almost half, not quite, to about here. So we can kind of get that line in there like so. The shadow is like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and transfer all of these main lines onto my grid here. Well, now that I've got the basic outline of the boat on the paper, what I need to do is to put in the horizon line, which is this line here. And horizon lines are always perfectly parallel to the paper, as they are in real life. So what I'm going to do is take a straight edge to put that in, and that starts, it looks like, up about 1/3 of the way on cell 6. So about 1/3 of the way, looks like about right here. So what we'll do now is just go across there and get that horizon line in there. Now what it looks like in the background is there's some trees and such. Looks like it goes over to about cell number 6 here. So what I'm going to do is just sort of make up what I think a tree line should look like along here. Okay, I think now we are ready to start shading it. So I should mention what kind of paper this is, and it's a Bristol paper with a vellum surface. And the nice thing about that is that because it's a soft paper, you'll be able to smudge and move the graphite around on the paper surface. So in order to get started, I'm going to start with a fairly hard, what I'd call a hard soft pencil, which would be an HB, if I can find that. So here's an HB pencil. And what I like to do is to start from the left and move right in shading, mainly so that I don't drag my hand across the graphite. So what I'm going to do here is get started with this horizon line here and just kind of work along it and change the hardness or the amount of graphite I'm putting down to indicate that it looks more like trees. One of the things I like when I'm drawing is to not completely fill things in with 100% detail and let your eye do a little bit of that. I think that makes the drawing a more engaging drawing for someone. You can see how I'm just getting that horizon and those trees to be just have a little bit of texture to them. In order to draw the mast going up here, I'm going to use my straight edge. You know, used to have drawing students, so or I've had people say to me, "Oh, I couldn't draw a straight line." I'm like, well, that's what rulers are for, is to draw a straight line. So I'm going to just kind of mark this out. I'm going to leave the ruler there while I start to shade that in so that I get a nice crisp line there. As I had said before, this paper really takes graphite nicely, and you can smudge very neatly. I'm putting this eraser shield there to keep up in the sky nice and crisp. You can see how that gives it kind of a nice soft texture, like that covering would be. Another nice thing about Bristol paper is then if you need to put a highlight back in there, you can come in with an eraser and easily put a little highlight back in. So the next thing I'm going to do is to work on some of this water that's in here. Again, mainly so that if I had all this drawn in, I'd be rubbing it with my hand and smudging it. So to do this, I'm just going to kind of go through and make marks that look like waves. I can see in the photograph that as it gets closer to the boat, they get bigger and more distinct than back here. So in this case, I'm not necessarily following it exactly the way it is, but just sort of generally get the idea of what those marks should look like. I can see over in this area that it's sort of a medium gray. So I'm going to leave it fairly white up here, and I'm just going to lay some graphite down in a general area like this. And then I'm going to go through and kind of blend that all together. Maybe blend some of these together so they're not quite so. And one of the things that's important when you do this, you make sure that your hands are very dry, which mine are. If they're not, it's a good idea to use a paper towel or something like that. You can see in the drawing here it has these two marks. That is the boom crutch, and my boom crutch is going to be one board down. So that's what these lines right here are the boom crutch. So that is going to be a dark line. So in that case, I cannot worry about going behind it. So now I've got the water kind of the way that I want it. What I'm going to do is start working on the interior of the boat. Get the darker areas in first. One of the things that makes a drawing dynamic is if you can have white whites and black blacks. So whenever there's an opportunity to really get a dark black in there, I'm going to do it, which this particular spot is a good example of that. And the white whites, I'm going to leave all of the sky completely white. And now that we've got most of the boat all drawn, now we need to put all of this reflection in here. This is where you can be a little more creative. You don't need to follow it exactly, just so you get the basic squiggles in there. So anyway, I'm going to get started with that. I'm going to start with the reflection of the hull first. I'm going to take a little of the graphite that's on my fingers and go up here around the corners, and I'll smudge it very, very slightly, and it'll help delineate the border. It's very hard to see there, but you'll see when I pull the tape off how that comes out. Well, I'm pretty happy with that. So there's one last thing to do, and that is to sign it. Well, that was a lot of fun. It's been a while since I've taken the time to do a drawing like that, and I'm pretty happy with the way it came out. For those of you wondering, the actual real time that it took me to draw that was probably about 3 to 3.5 hours, somewhere around in there. If by any chance you'd be interested in getting a print of this, leave me a comment below and I'll see if I can make that happen. While I was out at the boat show, I had a drawing to give away a watch and a coffee mug and a set of coasters. So I'm going to pull the winners out of the container right now. We'll give it a good shake and reach in there. So the winner of the watch is number 115. And the winner of the coffee mug is winner 59. And the winner of the coasters is number 1. Congratulations to all of you, and I'll be getting in touch with you in the next couple of days to get those sent to you. So as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you the next time on The Art of Boat Building.